I think saving and be patient is the one thing that I would, like I would never give up on telling myself as a kid and other kids around me. This is a very big importance of, be patient and waiting for the long term benefit instead of getting that instant, happiness right now. And then once you get it and, asking yourself what's next now, right? And just be patient and talk more about money, like entertain, like, as parents, you can talk to them about money, like find opportunities to talk to them about money as much as possible. Play games with them, make it fun, make it engaging. Yeah.
I love it. Well, I want to actually keep some of that and segue and to welcome everybody to the Growing Money with Sean Trey's podcast. I want to just keep this part in and segue because I loved what we talked about right here and move into, I got an awesome guest with me today. Can you introduce yourself to my guest for the Growing Money podcast? Who are you and what do you do?
Thank you for having me, Sean. My name is Thao Truong, and I am a financial advisor, certified financial planner. I work in the US and I help people make smart money make smart money decision and navigate through life transitions. Like we all can say for retirement, but for a lot of us young people, retirement is not in the library, the dictionary, because, like myself personally, I enjoy working until I die. And it's nice to have an option of calling work, is, like an option, but I don't think I would ever retire. And life is so short. I enjoy living the now. So how do you navigate between living the now and not sacrificing your future self? So that's what I help people with.
I love that. Well, one of the things too is like I I had seen there are so many people that you're right. How do you balance living for now and, working toward the future? Now, one of the things that I wanted to chat with you about, and we had talked about this, and you were talking about kids and saving. So, Ilani has been starting to start her own business in
Love
school.
that.
So we, yeah, we came back to the USA, and one of the things that one of the things that's a great invention that we have in the US that is not in Vietnam for schools and kids is a when I was a kid, and like people don't realize this, a lot of people have it. You have a pencil, right? And you use the pencil and you use the eraser. Back to my daughter. Ilani's been starting her own. Ilani's been starting her own school store. Now they have these pencils. I was back on the pencil. That's why I was. You don't even use a pencil, and you use the eraser. Now the problem with pencils is that the lead always lasts longer than the
Mhm.
eraser. So in America, they sell these little erasers that go on top of the pencil. And so we bought a bunch of those. I went to the dollar store and we bought for $1. We bought like it was like a pack of
Mhm.
25. And she started selling them in her class. And she's like, Dad, like, I love that you're a businessman and I'm going to sell these to my classmates. And so she was sitting there. And so she's like, I said, okay, well, how much are you selling them for? Because, yeah, I know you guys are not allowed to bring money to school because a lot of kids were selling things in class. And so the teacher's like, no money in school because some kids were borrowing it, which is not fixing the problem. Some of the kids were borrowing from others to buy things from the school store. And then they had like, the parents were getting called because they had borrowed like 500,000 from another kid, you know? And so, but Ilani was selling these and she was like, all right, well, here's my business deal. And she's like, I sell one for free and two, they have to pay me 10,000 down. And I was like, is everyone buying only one? And she's like, yeah. And I was like, because you're giving them away for free. And then she was correct. And she's like, oh. And I said, yeah. She's like, oh, well, they told me they were going to buy two next time. I said, I'm sure they did. I'm sure they did. And so I said, well, you can still give them one for free. Let them get used to the product. And then after that, they have to buy it. They can't buy another one for free. And she's like, oh. And so she started doing that. But it was like interesting because she started looking at the ideas of business like you were talking about early on in her
Mm.
career, in her life. And it was interesting because I said, well, what inspired you to start your own business? And she's like, well, I've been seeing you run your business. And so I was like, there we go. Now we're creating conversations. And It's interesting because, again, this whole podcast came up because of me not knowing what information I'm supposed to teach this kid. And so I was like, well, I got to go talk to these financial experts so I can see if I can get some good information. Talk to me more about like your early experiences and how you got down going on this path of being a financial advisor.
Yeah, well, I think my first, well, let's start with my first memory of money. When I talk to my client,
Yeah.
that's an exercise that I love to go through with everyone because it's the bring a lot of things to talk about later on, things to unpack later on. Because the way how we grow up with money, that's how we project into the world. Like and we treat money and we treat ourselves, and buy things with money. And later on, when you go into relationship with your significant other, they have their own set of belief and history
Yes.
and how their family teach them about money, and then like you have to navigate through that and then marry between the two belief system, right? So yeah, so
Right.
yeah. So for me, like earlier on, like my grandparents, they started to teach me about money by picking their white hair. And so each white hair I would get back then it was like 1,000 dong, which is like barely nothing.
Okay.
But I enjoy doing that because each hair that I get one dong, and my grandmother was getting older, and of course she's gonna have more white hair over the years. And for me, like seeing my piggy bank growing over time, that was such an exciting thing to go through. And little did I know that teach me about saving. Um, and then
Yeah.
later on, like just from that, it started making me love making more money and earning more. And it grow an interest in me, about business. And like I was very similar to Alani back then, and having my own business at school. Um, but I also noticed from earlier on that like having more money, you have more opportunities. Um, and however, like as I was growing up, I wanted to become a doctor, very similar to my dad.
Yeah.
But shortly after I go to the US and start my study over here, my family was going through a bankruptcy. My mom's business was
Wow.
just flipping up. So I have to decide very quickly that, okay, I cannot go back to Vietnam. So now I have to either be on my own, or go back to Vietnam and go back to Vietnamese, education system, which is, not something that I wanted to do for many reasons. But being in the US, staying here and being independent, I have more opportunity to help my family down the road. So I
Yeah.
was just thinking that maybe I should learn on how to trade stocks, and become an investment manager so that I can make money as quickly as possible, so I can help my family out. Um, and I did many small little business deals, and all of that is, like looking for short, quick wins. Very quickly, I learned that
Yeah.
that's not something that is very sustainable, and I end up losing a lot of money. But through
Mm.
school, studying finance, I was able to get a job, in wealth management. And very quickly, I learned that a lot of us who call ourselves financial advisor are not actually advisor, but more like investment manager and earning
Mm.
from selling a product to clients. So it's not really,
Yeah.
like they may be very knowledgeable, but the advice they're giving you is not really advice, but there's an actual intention behind it, right? So, like the bigger the
Yeah.
sell, or like you were just like chasing wealthier family, then your earning will be bigger. So I thought to myself, this can be it. But luckily, like after a while, I found another firm that worked more on aligning, the investment decision with real life goals, like, retirement planning, protecting your money from, taxes or the illness, the
Yeah.
unpredictable risk like illness or lawsuits, right? So then that's when financial
Yeah.
planning come into place. But then, like the more I learned about this thing, the more I love it, and the more I want to give this gift back to other people around me. Because I really don't
Uh-huh.
believe that wealth management should only be for the rich or people who are already wealthy. Like people like me and you who are still navigating through life, we have so many important decisions to make. Yeah. And we need this advice more than ever.
I 100% agree. I think that that's one of the things, like, one of the things that I've seen in the financial industry is that there's such a focus, and I get rich people have money, and that's great. It's nice to work with wealthy people. But at the same time, you see this guy over here, he might be a really, really savvy individual who right now is not wealthy. But if you work with that person and teach them the tools, they could be wealthy very easily, but they just need to learn how to navigate that. It's like Ilani started playing piano about 3 years ago, and I've kept her in piano lessons for 3 years. How? It was painful. It was painful. Like, first couple years, we went through 2 years of, like, da, 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 and I just like, oh, and I'm sitting there listening, I was like, "Just keep going. Play Mary Has a Little Lamb again. Come on, you can do it." And she just was poking away on the keys, and it just did not sound good. And I was just like, "Oh my goodness, this is painful." But we kept with it. And I said, "You know what? It's laying the foundation." I said, "I don't know if it's we're doing the right thing, but let's just keep it up, keep it going." And then what happened one day is my wife V came down, and V sat with her, and she says, I want to play a song for you." And she played her a song. It was like the intro to Ave Maria from
Mm,
Bach. And V just played it on, and then V knew a little bit of that song on piano, just a tiny little bit, and she showed it to Ilani. And it's not like you see every day where the light turns on, but, like, that was the light turn on moment. It was light turned on in Ilani's eyes, and suddenly piano became different. And what happened is her piano teacher came, and within 2 weeks, Ilani was playing Bach. And we went from, like, plucking away on the keys, and now she's playing Bach, she's playing Mozart, she's playing Chopin, and I'm just like, "Hang on." Like, 3 months ago, you were like, "Dunk, dunk, 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 dunk," and now it's like it's just, like, amazing music, and yet the foundation was being laid. Those steps were being put in place, and I think this is so powerful for financial finance, for investment, for things like that, because you might not see the results of what you're doing right away. You might just be putting one foot in front of the other. But, if we can teach kids, if we can teach adults, if we can work with all of these people, that these little financial moves that you're making are going to have a big, big, big repercussion down the road. So you're putting $50 in a savings account, you're putting $100 in a savings account, or into some type of high yield savings account. And you're not thinking about it. It's just $50, it's just $100. But then down the road, that becomes big, if you can keep it up.
yeah. It's funny how a lot of time people think of, investment just about, asset management. And honestly
Yeah.
speaking, just from what you just said earlier, Sean, it's all about mindset. So knowing that time is
Yes.
your friend and being patient and then putting just little penny away, like every penny counts. I mean, I don't ask people to be nickel and dime on everything, but know that
Yeah.
time is your power. And that's the biggest thing
Yeah.
that, like rich people use money to buy. And, like sometimes
Yeah.
you just have to start early because, like, when you are young, time is your best friend. The longer the runway is, the more
Yeah.
powerful the compound interest will be. So,
I 100%. We got Ailani into Muay Thai, and so she's been doing Thai boxing for a couple years now too. I make my daughter study a lot of stuff, partially because, I can't always be there to protect her, and I want her to know how to protect herself and how to take care of herself. So she studies Thai boxing with her cousins. And yesterday, she was like, "I'm gonna do 50
oh,
sit-ups." First of all, first she said, "I'm gonna do 50 push-ups." And I was like, "Wow, 50 push-ups?" And then she started doing sit-ups. I was like, "Well, those are sit-ups." But still. And what she's like, "I've never done 50." And then because the teacher made them do 50 in class, and she was so excited about it. And I said, "Well, you're better off doing 20 a couple
hmm
times, and you don't need to do 50 right now." She's like, "I wanna do 50." And I said, "Well, what I want you to do is to do 20, but to do it every
hmm
day." And she's like, "Oh." And I said, "You show me that you can do 20 every day for a week, and then we can move up to 30." And then so she started doing 20 every day. And the idea and what she started, and I said, some people will do something big once, but what we want to do in life is learn to do medium-sized things all the time. and because it's like, especially with financial habits, can you consistently put money into savings? Can you consistently put money into this? Because, like you said, it is all mental. And here's one of the things, too. And like you touched on this with Ilani's questions, it's also cultural. And this doesn't have to be America or Vietnam. It can be different regions, different places, different family
Totally.
attitudes towards money.
Hmm.
And this is right. This is something that I ran into with my wife. And when I moved to Vietnam, early on when I moved to Vietnam, there was an interesting thing. And it was something that I encountered, and it was one of my first encounters with a different money view. But like people describe something, and you'll understand what this is. And I'm gonna have to describe this for the listeners. Antioi, people like Antioi, like this Antioi lifestyle. Antioi is like kind of like a living for today. And I met all these people that would be going out and they like, I'm gonna go party. And are you saving for the future? No, no, no. It's like
Oh yeah.
and just like Antioi.
Or they that's the term that they use. Tính tới đâu tính tới đó. So yep. So what it means?
I
Yeah.
have a shirt that says that.
Mhm. Yep.
And so it's interesting. Now, let me ask you about this. Growing up in Vietnam, you got one set of money traditions, and it's like, and something that I saw early on, like, especially during that or Lunar New Year, for people who are listening who don't know what that is. It is the Lunar New Year, and it's a biggest holiday, probably one of the biggest holidays in the world that a lot of people in the West don't necessarily know about, but it's celebrated all throughout Asia. Specifically, the countries that are really big into it are Vietnam and China. But this Lunar New Year is a time where they have all these different. It's kind of like I describe it as like a Christmas type of vibe for Asia, and you celebrate with giving gifts. But there's not gifts; it's money. And every year, Ailani gets this lump sum of cash. And I mean, it's not like a little amount. Like sometimes I remember one Lunar New Year, she had like $1,000. And I was like, what does a kid do with $1,000, man? And so we would try to work with her really quick on money habits. But you growing up in these different cultures, how did like your early cultural upbringing in Vietnam affect some of the ways that you look at money now?
Well, let me ask you first. What did you end up doing with that money, or telling her to do with that money, or we tell her to do with that money?
Well, I had, at the early one, like, I think we just set it aside and held on to it for her, and then we allowed her to buy something big later on. And so she had that, and we were like, "You're not gonna go and spend all that. If you wanna spend." We did kind of like, was it the 50-20-30 type thing? We're like, "Alright, some of it has to go into saving, some of it has to go into, your needs versus wants." But we worked with her on saving, and eventually she ended up buying a Nintendo Switch, and like she was very proud of that was the thing that she saved up for and bought. But I didn't know what to tell her to do with it. I was just sitting there because I remember the biggest amount of money I got when I was a kid was I got $100 once from my uncle Ian, and that was a substantial amount of money as a kid. Yeah, that was a lot. Like, and I was just like, whoa, what am I going to do with $100? And I love my mom and my dad, but they didn't have a clear idea of what to do with it. And so I think it ended up getting spent on something ridiculous, some transformer or something. But that was again where I wanted to sit there and go, I need to talk to Ailani about, my cultural upbringing. My family, very money avoided, very much money avoided. We didn't talk about money. And even still, like I'm starting to talk to my mom now. I said, let's talk about what you're doing, talking about what I'm doing and working with my financial planner. And she's like, well, that's amazing. We never talked about that. I was like, I know, I know we didn't, but not hating on them. But, that's what I tried to do with Ailani. So back to you though.
Well, I'm glad that you didn't just take the money away and not telling her about it, because that's exactly what my mom did to me.
Really?
So after like seeing my money, like yeah, my piggy bank growing so big, and then one day wake up and I'm like, where the heck is my piggy bank? And I have no idea where it went. And so my mom starting to say, like, I pay for a lot of things for you, so now you gotta pay me back. Because I don't, I don't want you to spend all of that away.
Wow. Wow. That's really interesting. And one of the things too, like I want to get back to like the one of the reasons I started a YouTube channel for Ilani, and I was like, well, how do I, and like, say that starts, because we suddenly went from like 100 followers up to 10,000. And I still haven't monetized the channel, but I was like, well, if this starts monetizing eventually, this is something I was talking to my planner about, because I was like, do, you hear all the time about kids whose parents have like taken away or do this or that. How do you teach a child about how to manage money without removing it from them? Or without stifling those questions, like when she started talking about business, I had a couple options. When she was telling about selling things to her classmates, I could have been like, "That's a bad idea, no." Or I could have been like, "Okay, that's great, take all their money." I don't know, but, there's many different ways to engage it. But if you were to go and to look at that again, what do you think your mom taking your money was teaching you about a relationship with money? What type of relationship do you think that was, started? What were the money stories that you were getting at that point in time?
I think it's either money avoidance or money vigilance. Um, I don't think that she. I think also it started from the story previously, like how I had a business in class and I make very good money and I use my money to buy my friends to do things, right? And I think she's avoiding me, like she's afraid of me using or fully utilizing the power of money. And so she liked to take it away from me. However, my grandparents is on the other is on the other hand. So this is, something that it's not just about cultural. Sometimes it's just like family philosophy of how you deal with money because not just like husband and wife, but also parents and then grandparents and then grandparents on both sides, right? So my grandparents love to spoil me. They would look for all kind of opportunity to give me money. So they would, like they give me money for chores, right? They don't just hand it over, but they give it for all the chores. But for my mom, to her, like her relief is that why would I have to pay you money when all you do is taking care of your own thing and cleaning up after yourself, right? However, occasionally she would give me money if I clean her car or if I go clean her bathroom. So in some way, she's teaching me that like, hey, you will receive money back. You will earn if you provide values. So that is something that is very important that I was able to walk away with. But like even back to that story about kids doing business in school, I don't think that you should tell them like, hey, that is bad and that's a no. Um, because if you
Yeah,
shame from
right.
it, they will just like block it off from you, or like they think like very long raw view about it. But like there's so much learning opportunity that you can take away from that and guiding them through.
And I wish schools did it, because, like, at that point in time, it's such a learning moment, because, like, when she was talking, like, she's like, "If my teacher knew we were doing this," like, the first of all, with the school banned kids from bringing money to
Mm-hmm.
school, like, because the kids were just borrowing and lending, and sure, there were some loan shark little young loan sharks in there too, like, "Come on, where's my money at?" You know? But, it's interesting because, like, but money avoidance is not the way to work
Mm-hmm.
with people on it. And again, like, because those people are gonna just kinda hide that away, and they're gonna get in this habit of never talking about it. And that is dangerous in and of itself, because then you get these people that are, they grow up, and, and we live in a world where if you don't talk about it, a little problem can become a big problem. Something that's small can become larger, and you have to, if we can look at these things and have communication about it, it's so much better. Now, let me ask you this, because when you came to the US, were you kind of shocked by the different ways people looked or interacted with money? Because for me, when I came to Vietnam, I was blown away by the differences in approaches to money. First of all, one of the things that was interesting for me was seeing how people naturally already had ways to hedge against inflation. And one of those was, everyone I knew had families who had money in gold. Like, gold was is still a big thing here, because people, like, there wasn't necessarily a lot of options for people to buy into stocks. And, there was massive inflation. When I first moved to Vietnam in
Mm-hmm.
2001, it was 13,000
Mm-hmm.
dong for
Mm-hmm.
$1. Now it's 26,000 dong for $1. And so, that's pretty major inflation, over the last 20 some odd years. But when you came to the US and started looking at these things and seeing different approaches to money, how did you see that? What were some of the biggest differences that you noticed between the two worldviews?
Well, even from dating games, right? Like money is
Right?
very individual and very separate over here versus in Vietnam. Like once like you in relationship with someone, automatically the woman would assume that she has the power over the man wallet.
Yes.
You don't even
My wife told me this.
yeah, you just need to be boyfriend and girlfriends, and that's all you need. You don't even need to get married. But like over here,
Yep.
that's not a thing. Like even with my ex-husband and my current partner, like we treat money very separate. Like we all have our separate pool of money, and we have a shared pool of
Yeah.
money where we pay for the common use, in the family. But outside of that, that's daily cash flow. But then when you think of investment in Vietnam, like you say, most people invest in gold or real estate. And those are the
Yeah.
two channels that they
Yep.
trust and they believe in. I mean, the infrastructure in Vietnam is not ideal for other type of investment quite yet. But in the US, we have
Yeah.
many more like stocks, mutual
Investment
fund,
vehicle.
ETFs.
Yeah.
Like now you have crypto, like all kind of funds like available. But so
Yeah.
when I come across a Vietnamese American over here, especially if they are in the older generation, talking to them about investing to other things outside of cash and gold and real estate are super hard because that's all they know. And they very distrust the system. Um, it's very interesting. And then in Vietnam, people are looking for ways to invest money over here into other things to diversify their money out. Because real
Yeah.
estate is no longer the same in Vietnam anymore. And gold it can
No.
keep up with inflation, but like if you look at potential growth into the future, it doesn't bring in as much as like stocks or real estate. If you look into like the long term spend, because like I think between 2010 to or like 2012 from 2012, I think there was like a whole decade of gold losing value and come back to what it used to be. So, like gold is a good inflation hedge, but it's definitely, if you want more growth, that doesn't do enough. Like I don't
Yeah.
want my clients to have like all their money dumped into gold either. So it's really interesting. You have
Yeah.
to balance that out with them and educate them about what they actually want and the potential return and whether the money or that return will support what they want or not. Because, we're talking about that, like you cannot just blindly chasing return and not knowing that, like where your needs are. Because like if you put a lot of money into
Yeah.
real estate, right? So you need to have cash flow for your living expenses. But real estate is not that easy to
Yeah.
sell. So if something happened,
No.
you may not be able to sell it and get money out as fast as possible. I mean, you'd be lucky if you have it for rent and those rental earning income. But like cash flow is another thing that people have to think about when they approach investment.
I love that. Well, Tao, we are coming up on the time that we have allotted to us, and I want to say I would love to continue this another time, but this has been awesome, and I want to thank you so much for your time today. And I'm going to end the recording. But first of all, where can people look up for more information about you?
Where people can look me up, my website is
Yeah.
anorawealth.com. Anora, N is like, N in Vietnamese is peaceful. And then aura
Yeah.
is just, your light aura. So I want people to have a peaceful feel about money and when they approach money. So anorawealth.com.